And I've got Diane, Mike, Deb, and Elaine. So I'm gonna call to order. Everyone can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so welcome to our May 11th, 2021 Tiverton School Committee meeting. The first item is number 3, FY budget presentation and vote on the final budget number. This is going to be a little bit of a review of the data that we went over in our meeting last Thursday. And just want to be sure, because I believe there is some public interest in this. Dr. Sanchioni and Mr. Carnevale, we're sure that we're being recorded.
We are streaming live on YouTube right now, which is backed up. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to turn over the floor to Dr. Sanchioni and Ms. Roderick.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I'm going to share my screen with you and give you a good look at the current situation with our budget. That clear there, Dave? Okay, great. So we're going to talk about the current status of our budget. So as Dr. Larkin referred, some of this information we shared with you last week. The biggest question that a lot of people are asking and certainly worth answering is, why is the Tiverton Public Schools in a deficit? Why is the Tiverton Public School needing such a large increase in their budget this year? And, that's answered in this chart here. And there's a lot of data here, and I only want you to turn your attention to the last 2 columns where it says town portion and the percent increase or decrease. And so starting in, from 16 to 17, you can see here, if you follow the cursor, that our budget actually went down by 0.5%. And then it increased 0.1, increased 0.4, increased 5.1. That was a petitioner's budget a couple years ago. And then last year, our budget increased 0. And so these small increases certainly have not kept up with inflation, have not kept up with the cost of busing and special education and energy and all the things that our school system needs to function successfully. And the school committee has wisely used revenue from fund balance and Medicaid and other one-time sources. And those sources have now dried up, no longer available. But it's this chronic underfunding here that has created the structural deficit, has created this large gap. Now, another question that's worth answering is, well, actually, before we get there, the impact of last year's 0. The impact of last year's 0 is displayed on this slide here, where we reduced our staffing by 24.2. And you can see the list here, and our principals could speak to you about the impact that all these positions have had on the district. Our district isn't the same this year as it was last year. Now, these are real cuts, and they've been impactful on the impact of on the delivery of the education in our district. But more importantly, I'm showing you just the staffing cuts because that's easy for people to understand. Prior to even cutting one staff member, school committee and administration made the decision to trim our expensive accounts by almost $1 million. So we cut those expensive accounts down to the bare bone minimum and then started eliminating teachers. And that's important to remember as we go through this year's budget situations. However, before we get there, another question worth answering is the question's been asked, did our contracts cause the budget problem? Again, I'm showing you 10 years of increases in our contracts, and you can see the first 4 years here are basically at 0. It's a couple 1.75s, but those are top step only. Then a very modest 2% for 3 years. And then the last contract, again, is really right in line with what other school districts are offering their employees, the 3 to 3.5 to 3.5. What's important to know that when we, and I could show this data, that when we look at teacher salaries in Tiverton, we look at the first step, the fifth step, the top step, and compare ourselves to other districts, we're always in that lower third, almost at the bottom. So certainly our contracts can't be the reason that we have this structural deficit and this large need for an increase this year. The other question that was proposed was, did our one-to-one cause the budget problem? And I would say in the time of our greatest need, and the shining star for our district starting last March was the ability for us to be in one-to-one and go one-to-one. You know, we were one-to-one grades 5 to 12. We quickly pivoted and moved to our K through 4. These devices allow our students to become 21st century ready, to allow them to understand how to use technology to advance their education. But most importantly, if anyone's thinking this caused a budget problem, it's $119,000 annually over 3 years. Less than 1% when you're looking at a $29 million budget. It certainly has not been the problem for our budget. And more importantly, Tiverton is really just keeping up with every other district around Rhode Island. Every district around Rhode Island is one-to-one. Certainly the pandemic forced districts to get there. Our kids had the advantage that we were in it 5 through 12. Before the pandemic, we had trained our teachers how to use technology. So it really became a seamless process for us, but certainly not the cause of any budget deficit. So that transitions then to the request for this year. Administration has proposed to the school committee a level service budget, and level service is defined by no new staff, no new programs, no new curriculum, no new technology, nothing. Just take what we're doing this year in FY21 and move it ahead 1 year, not adding back any of those 24 positions we cut, just staying the same. And that budget comes in at $33.9 million. That's our budget. That's the budget we really need to achieve to continue to deliver what I would call an adequate education. And if we don't achieve the 33.9, again, I'm going to go back to a point I already made. We cannot cut our expense accounts anymore. They've been brought down to bare bones levels. So that means any further reductions to a budget below 33.9 means reductions to staff. So scenario 1, school committee voted a budget of $32.5 million, and recognizing that that is a requirement, that it's the maximum you could vote on, and recognizing that that would cause a 1.4, almost a $1.5 million deficit. So to address that deficit, that means we would have to cut another 12.6 FTE. Almost 10 of them are teachers. So losing another 10 teachers, another 12.6 on top of the 24.2 last year, again, it's just devastating consequences for the education we deliver in this system. And then there's scenario 2. If in fact we were funded again at the 0 level like we were last year, that deficit would be 2.4 million. Now, the point I want to make is we're cutting 12.6 in scenario 1. And here we're going to add in another 9, 5 middle school teachers and 4 high school teachers. This isn't separate. It's adding to it's closing that other $986,000 cut. So again, now we're talking 21.6 staff members if we were funded at 0. We literally couldn't open our school system. We wouldn't have enough teachers. Again, you're talking 45 staff members over 2 years. And again, we had given you some data on the impact of closing an elementary school. So we keep coming back to 33.9 is our number. We continue to share this with our staff, with our parent community, and are about to begin sharing this information with the community at large in Tiverton. We continue to remind people that the FTR vote is July 17th. And as soon as we have information on absentee balloting and things of that nature, because we know that this Saturday in the middle of the summer could be impactful for our school supporters, we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to support us. And again, the magic number is 33.9. So that's the slides. A lot of information there, and our principals, our finance directors with us, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sanquioni, for that very clear sort of review of the current budget issues that we're facing. I'm going to open up the floor to the members of the committee. Mr. Dakota, so let you go first. You're muted, Mike. Mike, you want to go first? You're muted.
Sorry, my computer shut off and went black. Sorry.
Yeah, you flashed in and out. It was
Yeah, I don't know. That was weird, but I am back. I don't think I have any questions as much as I just one thing I look at going back to the slide about the teachers' raises. I mean, unequivocally, they went 4 years without a raise at all, and then I know the last contract gave them a little over 10%. But if you break down the years they got 2% and the years they got zero, I mean, they haven't even really made 2% every year, which I think is very standard cost of living. So that part shouldn't be a driver for anyone's decisions why they feel or what their opinion is about our budget and why we're operating in a negative deficit. I think it's just time to get the community to start to have a change of mind to support schools and realize that we have costs just like everyone else, from busing to special education needs to a reduction in matching funds from RIDE. And we just want to get the money we need to continue what we're doing without spending anything extra. So appreciate the effort from Amy Roderick to get these numbers, and I just hope the budget committee and the community support what we need.
Thanks, Mike. Just to work on from one of the things you said, we're trying to continue to do what we, not we actually, we have the easy job in a way, what our teachers and administrators continue to do day after day after day in sort of very challenging times and environment. But one thing we will be at risk of is not conforming with the basic education plan, which we are statutorily required to provide to our students, and could certainly land us in court if we start to make cuts that are too drastic. Actually, I would say all of these cuts are too drastic, but we are very close to, I think, flirting with that, not meeting that minimum requirement of what is called the basic education plan. That is law, not opinion, not sort of wants or aspirations. It is the law. I'm going to call on Ms. Farnworth.
Thank you. Dr. Larkin, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Ms. Roderick, and I hate to put you on the spot, Amy, but last week at our workshop, you gave us a good background on the state aid issue. And I'm wondering if you can go over that again for us tonight, because I think it's an important component of the discussion right now.
You mean the worksheet that I had provided?
Well, I know we don't have the worksheet in our package, but the fact of the matter is we're losing state aid this year.
Okay, so the reduction in state aid, first of all, it is, as Dr. Larkin said last week, it is a very objective formula. It's almost exclusively mathematical. And the components of that are not only enrollment, but also when you go through the machinations of the formula, some of the things that are taken into account are property valuations and median income as provided by, I believe, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So all of the information that's going into the formula is objectively obtained from various sources and is consistent for all the communities in the state of Rhode Island. So effectively, in the last calculation, the property values, the valuation in Tiverton, as well as the median income has gone up. And when you run it through the calculation, it basically comes to the conclusion that the town can afford to pay more toward education. So median income has gone up, valuations have gone up. So therefore, the portion or assistance we're getting from the state has been reduced.
Thank you very much, Amy.
You're welcome.
You know, one of the things that I brought out last week during our workshop, and I want to reiterate tonight, you know, And last week at the time, I raised the fact that it was Teacher Appreciation Week. That's an annual event. And, even despite the COVID restrictions, I just want to give a shout out to our PTOs who like they always do, they stepped up and made sure that our teachers were thought of as best they could with the restrictions in place. And I do want to thank them for that. Also, speaking of our teachers, though, over the last year and a half now, they've really stepped up in ways that none of us imagined they ever would have to, and including themselves, right? Despite some real concerns over possible exposure to the virus. I mean, we've all had those concerns. They've showed up every day in their classrooms, and they've continued to provide the best possible education that they could to benefit our town's children. And above and beyond that, they've also had to learn to quickly figure out how to teach not only those children that were sitting in class in front of them, but at the same time, teach those who are learning from home. So, I mean, at this point, and they did all of this without, asking for any extra compensation, and really just, again, for the benefit of the children of Tiverton. And I think they deserve a real round of thank you and our respect, because I can't even imagine what that would have been like for any human being to have to go through as much as they have in the last year in the educational environment. And our healthcare workers deserve our admiration, so do our teachers. And on top of all of that, recently, I don't know, what's in the water all of a sudden in Tiverton, but we've got some educators that are getting some very well-deserved recognition as well. We have Ms. McFarland, our district teacher of the year, who's now a finalist for Rhode Island Teacher of the Year. We have Mr. Colohan, who I just read today, is a Rhode Island finalist for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science. We have Mr. Murray, our athletic director. I know, he's the most popular guy in town, I think, but you know what? He and all of the athletic directors have really had to step up to, take very good care to ensure that our kids could participate in athletics during these crazy times. And of course, last but certainly not least, Ms. Wardell, the Cassett School principal, recently was named the Rhode Island Elementary Principal of the Year. I couldn't be more proud of these educators, all of them, and because they've been giving their all for Tiverton school students. And that's something we have to remember. And despite all of that great news, here we are once again, as we were a year ago, faced with the real possibility of cutting more staff and potentially programs because of a lack of adequate funding. This wasn't easy last year. I can tell you all, it was not easy when we had to cut those 24 positions. And it will be even more difficult this time around. As we hold our discussions tonight, we all have to remember and be cognizant of the fact that our teachers, support staff, and administration represent the heart that keeps the body of our schools functioning. Our Tiverton children need them in order to get the education they require for the bright future they deserve. And let's keep that all in mind. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I have to sort of just building on some of your comments. I think there's something that's really important to acknowledge, that the teachers were intimately involved in the planning and execution of our shift to distance learning, without a word of complaint. They were intimately involved in the planning, despite, sort of not getting a lot of guidance from Ryan, I have to say, and some of it somewhat delayed over the summer, when I'm sure they would have rather been doing other things, I'm sure doing other things like getting ready for the fall, intimately involved in planning, and, all came back. This was pre-vaccination. We were confident that we had done the right things in terms of instituting cleaning processes in the schools. We had gone through the renovation projects, so we had much better ventilation. But at the, beginning of the day, I should say, not the end of the day. At the beginning of the day, they all came back. And I was there when we sort of opened the school year with a convocation, and it was really heartening to see everyone showing up, if you will. So I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge on the part of our teachers. And then lastly, I would say, we also had great leadership and were called out several times by the governor for the excellent job we did. I would say we did it, much better than any other district in Rhode Island, and in fact, any other district in Massachusetts, to get back. When I sort of heard some of the stories about how much difficulty a lot of districts were facing, particularly in Massachusetts, and I cite Massachusetts not only because they're our neighbor, whom we love, but also because they are usually cited as leading the nation, actually, in quality of education. And we did much better than most districts, as far as I could tell, than Massachusetts. So, we really did a good job, did a great job, actually. However, some of that came at a cost in dollars and cents. And we are still not whole from all of the COVID mitigation that we had to do in order to make the schools safe, in order to make our students safe, in order to give our parents and families confidence that they could return to school and receive the best education that we could offer them. So I'm going to get off my soapbox for a minute. I'll be back on it, I'm sure, soon enough. Mrs. Palish, any questions or comments on the budget presentation so far?
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Larkin. Certainly, I reiterate what everyone else has said, but one of the things I think we brought up last week that always bears repeating, Dr. Sanquioni or Ms. Roderick, whoever wants to speak to it, is why can't we just use the Esser funds to plug our deficit? And what are the other districts doing with those Esser funds? What are the other peers doing that you're hearing? Whoever wants to address it.
Sure, I'll start, Ms. Palish, and as you have already articulated, it's unfortunate that all our districts are receiving these Esser funds, and we do have the guidelines now for Esser 2. And the federal government always has one very strict requirement, and that is you can supplement, you can't supplant, which basically means you can't replace what the district's required to provide, but you can add to it. And so that puts us in a precarious situation where we have money, we're going to be laying people off, yet we could supplement what we're doing by hiring some staff members. And we have to remember, though, that this is one-time money. So whatever we do with it, it will go away in a year or two, and it just creates another deficit, or it becomes a part-time position for us in the sense it won't be there for the long term. And it's interesting because I am on a call with all the East Bay superintendents every Thursday, and they talk about adding in social workers, and they adding in extra guidance counselors to address their students and the emotions of coming back from COVID. They're talking about doing extensive learning plans after school and adding math tutors and reading tutors and things of that nature. And we're basically looking at potentially using these funds to replace positions that we might cut in the realm of guidance or social workers or psychologists or things of that nature. So while other districts are going to enhance their education, we're basically potentially going to be using this just to maintain what we're doing and not giving the Tiverton kids the advantage that these funds were designed for. The one part I will emphasize, so 20% is required to be used to address learning loss. And our principals have all worked extensively hard to put together some fine summer programs that you'll see coming out at all 3 levels. And we will continue some strong tutoring programs that we currently have in place at the middle school and high school into next year. So we will use some funds to help our students as it's designed to do. But the rest is sort of up in the air for us, as most things are, because until we know that budget number, we kind of get locked into just waiting.
Well, and I think that's kind of the point is, yes, there are funds coming to all schools, nationwide. I think the town is getting 1.5 million, plus there's another 3 million that's going to Newport County that will be, the towns can share. But I think your point is very well taken, both for schools and for municipalities. The intention is to improve, not to simply, plug a deficit that has been, 7 years in the making, and that will just be right where we are now next year. And we won't have improved anything, which was the intent of the funding. So I just know, I know it's out there. So, I wanted to just make sure we addressed that, that money isn't intended to basically plug, funding gaps that have been caused by, chronic underfunding of the schools. Amy, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add before I went on.
Excuse me. No, I think for the most part, Dr. Sanquioni and yourself covered it. It's really to provide direct educational services to the children, to the students, and so that they can catch up and achieve and succeed. And, to use that money for 1 year it will help us. Using that money for 1 year to backfill a structural deficit doesn't accomplish that.
All right, thanks. The next question I guess I have, Peter, it's really just, I like Dr. Larkin mentioned, I am concerned about the basic education plan. And I do think we probably need to have Attorney Scungio at least looking into, or beginning that discussion of what is the basic education plan, getting some direction from RIDE. I don't want him to spend a whole lot of time, but I do want to make sure that he understands sort of the different scenarios so that he can start looking at that. The other thing that as we all do, we have our constituents, we have our social media, and we hear things. And I don't know if one of the elementary principals want to address it. But why can't we close an elementary school? So I don't know if one of you want to, jump in and sort of address that. It's the elephant. Let's talk about it.
I'll definitely address it. This is Mr. Cabral. As everyone can remember, when we built the elementary schools, originally we wanted to build one big elementary school, and the town in whole voted that down and decided they wanted neighborhood schools. The town of Tiverton spent more money on our neighborhood schools because they wanted the kids to be with the kids in their neighborhoods, and they wanted small class sizes. We've already looked at closing an elementary school, and I've been adamantly opposed to closing an elementary school because of the destruction it's going to do for our elementary programs and for the kids at the elementary level. If we have to go down that road because we don't have money, we're going to have to send our 4th grade students to the middle school because we don't have room in the 2 remaining elementary schools to keep all the kids that are in elementary in those 2 buildings. So that's the first negative. The next negative is getting students, the age span of the students at the middle school is not going to be educationally appropriate. The kids, the 4th grade students belong with their elementary kids. They're the leaders of the school. Those our 4th graders that have been with us for 4 years already are looking up and matured as they've went through their educational process at all 3 of our elementary schools. If you look at our 3 elementary schools, all the elementary schools are on and still outstanding. So if we close one, we're going to be closing a building and still paying the bond. And it's also going to cost us money because if one of the buildings are not used as an elementary school, you're not going to get your state funding return. And I know Dr. Sanquioni has addressed that in the plan that we discussed if we have to close an elementary school. It's just a bad option. It doesn't make any sense for the kids, and it definitely doesn't make any sense for the town.
Thank you, Manny. And I think that's one of the things. I want people to understand, and you all, our admin team, you spend a lot of time looking at these different options and discussing what's going to be in the best interests of our students. And I'm not sure people realize how much time you really, really do spend. So let's, it's kind of, let's fund education, properly, and let's have our admin team, spend their time discussing, improvements and what other great things can we do, and what kind of advancements can we go after, and those types of things, because I don't think people understand how much the inordinate amount of time it takes to every year be discussing, okay, we got $1, now what do we do? Suzette, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just very quickly, if we think about what's best for children, especially our youngest children, one of the schools is in the northern end of town, one is in the middle, and the second one's kind of in the middle. If any of those schools close, we're going to be putting our youngest children on buses anywhere between 3:30 and 3:45. By the time they get home in the wintertime, they're going to be getting home in the dark. And it's really just it's not appropriate nor safe, especially when our buses have to travel all over the town. And so that's very, very concerning for us as principals. We want to make sure our children are safe.
Thank you. And Dr. Larkin, that's all I have for right now. I just really wanted people to understand that these difficult decisions and discussions are being had by our staff, and it's discussions it's time. I wish we could, and time is money. It's time and money we spend on our staff that I wish we could be spending on education.
Dr. Larkin, this is Mr. Grawley. One further thing I'd like to say is, if we look at our elementary schools, our present 3 elementary schools in place, we have 1 classroom in each building that probably could use, we could convert that back to a classroom. With all the building that's going on in town, we're going to have to be talking about adding on to one of our elementary schools with the amount of building that's going on.
No, that's an excellent
We're not
point.
closing the school.
Yeah. Amy, Roderick?
So just adding on to what Mr. Cabral said about we will lose reimbursement from RIDE on the bonds if the building is not used as a school, but also any cost savings in closing a school is not necessarily 1-for-1, meaning if you shut down the school, all of those costs are not saved, because some of the staff and so forth will be moving to other schools to accommodate the same population of students. So if it cost, for example, say $3 million hypothetically to run one of the elementary schools, the dollar figure that would be saved in closing it is not $3 million. It's probably somewhere between, if I had to just pick a percentage out of the air, between 40 and 50% of that, maybe. So it's not necessarily, I want people to understand it's not necessarily a 1-for-1. When you shut down the building, you don't save 100% of the costs.
Right. Clearly, or maybe not so clearly, but the savings of closing a school, very little of that is personnel, and that is always our biggest expense. And we still need to maintain the building itself, as we have care and custody of that building, and we need to make sure it remains viable as a school or whatever else it might potentially be used for, as well as the loss of the reimbursement for the bonds that were passed to build and renovate the schools. Mrs. Pavo?
I have no questions. The only comment I will make is that everyone has touched on everything that needs to be said. Closing an elementary school doesn't save us money. We still need the personnel. We still have to maintain the building. We need to be in compliance with our BEP. And we've been underfunded for all these years. And I think it's time now that we have to have everyone step up to the plate and face the fact that this is the amount of money that we need, the budget we need to run our school district this year. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm last, although I kind of went into some of the things already. I just want to go back to the funding formula for a moment and just make sure a couple things are very clear. One of the issues is that the real property values, or the intrinsic value of property, went up over the course of time in Tiverton, and that is one of the things that drove the change in the result of the funding formula. The funding formula itself has been in place for at least 15 years, I think longer than that. I don't remember exactly when the last iteration of it was. And the only body that can change that is actually the legislature, with the signature of the governor. So that is not likely to change. So it is a very objective measure. And one of the issues that drove the decrease in state aid for us, and frankly, most of our increases in budget over the last 10 years have been through increases in state aid. But one of the reasons that the state aid went down was because the value of property in Tiverton went up. That is not the valuation that you may have received a couple of weeks ago. It is the valuation probably of 2019 or 2020. So while there may be a bubble that is driven somewhat by the pandemic in terms of real estate values, and that's probably what drove any increases anyone saw 2 to 3 weeks ago. And that should be proportionate across the town so that the actual tax rate will probably go down. But the reason why the funding state aid went down is because the funding formula accounted for real increases in property values in Tiverton, and actually a rise in median income. People may not feel richer, but that is in fact the case, that median income in Tiverton went up. I believe the other sort of big demographic driver, other than total enrollment, is the number of students who are eligible for free or reduced lunch. That I believe has remained relatively stable. Am I correct in that, Dr. Sanquioni?
Yes, you are, Dr. Locken. That's our same percentage.
So when that stays stable, and the median income goes up and the real property values go up, then your state aid will inevitably go down unless the formula itself is changed. Formula is very objective. You may need a degree in math to understand it, but it is mathematical and objective. One question I had, and this is actually either to Mike, because you may remember this specifically, or Amy or Peter for that matter. So last year there was a history here of what happened with the budget, and driven largely by the pandemic. We had an increase that was voted by the budget committee. Granted, it had not yet gone to the financial town referendum, but we had an increase that was voted by the budget committee, I want to say of 2% or 1.5%. Mike, do you remember the actual number?
I do. It was 2%.
Okay. And so, what happened was then, because of the pandemic, we actually got flat funded. So that 2% was not ever put before the voters. And so, Amy, maybe you can tell us, what would our deficit, that delta of 1.4 million between the budget we voted and what the budget we actually need is. I believe that would have significantly reduced that 1.4 million. 2% of our operating budget. It's about $700,000 if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, so again, it's a percent. Their percent that they voted is on the town portion.
Right, the town levy.
The town levy, correct.
The town levy to support schools.
Right. So yeah, so that is roughly, without all the information in front of me, is probably close to $500,000. And so if we had gotten the 2% and then even the 4%, the 4% is closer to $1 million. So that would have put a big dent in the deficit to the good.
Okay. So, and so the point I'm making is that, we then actually had level funding. We had discussions on this committee in July, August, about submitting a school budget. It was actually pretty unclear exactly how we could do that since the dates of the referendum had changed, whether or not we actually had the option, what we could do with that number. But we had the option, frankly, of per the charter, of submitting our own budget to the voters. This committee, I know, Mike, you weren't on it, but the four members that were, and Mrs. Black, who was, we all decided that that was not in the best interest of the town. That there were too many financial uncertainties, there were too many health uncertainties, frankly, epidemiological uncertainties. I certainly can appreciate those at the time about what was going to happen next. I think we all felt that. And so our decision was to not submit an alternative budget as per the charter to the voters, recognizing that the town had to sort of step up and try and figure out what to do next. And what to do next was to not increase our spending. Actually, revenue, I believe, was actually better for that fiscal year, this fiscal year, than was anticipated. And also anticipated was the fact that we would try and make this up, because we cannot rob our futures, if you will, by not properly funding education. And that was the decision of this committee. I think we need to make clear to the voters, to the citizens of the town, that we do, however, need to recognize that and try and accommodate that in deciding what the budget for the next year is going to be. That was, more a statement than it was a question. I recognize that. And I guess the last thing I would like to say before we open it up to questions or comments from the public or our administrators is that, the schools are the thing that holds the community together. It's actually drives the quality of the community life. And I think you see that actually in our graduations. You see that in our sports teams. You see that in people using the schools for things that are not school related, but, walking the track, using the schools for basketball leagues, for youth sports and other things. And that is really, we're protecting our own community when we protect and continue to fund the schools appropriately. And always remember that if you have children, they will be making decisions about your retirement and your nursing home. So you want to educate them and make sure that they have a good basis on which to make those decisions. If you don't have children at all, please remember that it is those non-relatives that will be making your decisions when they come in as home health aides or doctors or nurses or people trying to understand how financing of healthcare and elder care works in the 21st century. So we need to make sure that our children have the brightest future possible for them because their future drives our own. There's really no other way of understanding it than that. All right. I have a couple questions, I think, from the community. Ms. Delcourt, maybe you can sort of give us if there's any questions or comments from the community.
So the first question is from Julie. And she says, how are you handling notifying staff of potential reductions in positions by June 1st, given the FTR is not until June?
That is a good question for Dr. Sanchioni.
It's actually not a good question, Dr. Larkin. It's an unfortunate question in the sense that, we will need to notify our staff members that we will be giving layoff notices to meet a June 1st deadline by statute, prepare based upon the worst budget scenario. And we're going to have to do that very delicately, and working with the principals on that to let these people know how valuable they are, how we're doing everything possible to avoid this from happening. You know, we've done a lot of great training of our staff the last 2 years using technology strategies. Feel like we've got some people who could walk into other districts now and do an amazing job thanks to the Tiverton Public Schools. And so we don't want that to happen. So it's a very delicate conversation of letting people know, I've got to give you this layoff notice, but at the same time, I want to keep you, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you. And trust me and hang in there with us. And on July 17th, I'll let you know for sure. So yeah, it's a fine line to walk, but we will be giving out layoff notices over the next 10 days.
So, and that does highlight the importance of the financial town referendum. And, you know, sort of the way the calendar, as well as the statute, it is by statute that we need to notify teachers if they are at risk of being laid off or need to be laid off. And typically by the charter, we would have had an established budget by then. But you know, the charter itself, I think, is flawed in many respects, and creating this new calendar really puts us at a disadvantage. Other questions from the public, Ms. Delcourt?
Yes, so the next question is also from Julie, asking, is the school committee presenting a different budget to the town than the superintendent?
So I guess I can take a first crack at that as chair. So the answer is no. By statute, by rules of governance, the budget submitted by the school committee and the superintendent are one and the same. The issue is that by statute as well, our capacity to request a budget is limited by the cap. So our requested budget of $32.5 million is the maximum that the school committee can by law request. That is not the maximum that the voters or the town can allocate. So it is within the power of the voters to approve a budget of $33.9 million within the law. But the school committee itself cannot go above that $32.5 million. As far as I know, although Peter may have a different view of this, the superintendent cannot submit his own budget as much as he might like to.
Is it 32.5 or 32.1? Amy?
I think it's 32.5, isn't it? Wasn't it?
32.5, 32.1 was last year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the public, or if anybody from the school committee would like to kind of comment on the question, the answer that I gave, please feel free.
Dr. Lott, I would just maybe enhance that answer by saying that I know that the administration and the school committee, number one support will go to a petitioner's budget for 33.9, and that's where we're united.
Okay. Anything else from the public, Ms. Delcourt?
Yes, Rose Mello Souza is asking, wouldn't closing a school also mean that the 8th graders would have to move to the high school?
That is correct.
And then the last question is from Julie again. She says, thank you. The worst budget scenario would result in about 20 layoffs, correct?
Correct.
And that's where we get into problems with meeting the basic educational plan. I'm not sure that we would be able to do that. Not the professional educator here, but we got to be getting very close, if not actually beginning to violate the basic educational plan statute.
Yeah, I'll just confirm that for you, Dr. Locken. At that level, we would not be able to meet the BEP.
Ms. Farnworth, I think you had your hand up.
Oh, I'm wondering, Dr. Secchione, Dr. Larkin, if we could possibly get Mr. Scungio on one of our meetings in the near future to speak to the BEP.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Any other questions from the public, Ms. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, any comments or questions from any of our administrators on the meeting? And any other questions or comments from the school committee?
So it sounds like, as we know, we're constrained with the amount that we previously submitted. So there's going to be no change to that. I mean, I'm assuming that, Dr. Sanchione is going to, let the, budget committee know there's been no change from our previous submission. I don't know if people feel like we need to vote on that again. But I did want to consider perhaps passing on a statement because Dr. Larkin, while that state law does constrain what we can formally adopt, it does contemplate that, as does our charter, that, as you already rightfully pointed out, that an appropriation either from the budget committee or from a petitioner can appropriate more. I'll just read the language in the law. It says, if the amount appropriated by the town meeting, town council, or a budget referendum is either more or less, but clearly it says more, than recommended and requested by the school committee shall within 30 days revise their estimates and recommendations. So that same law that, sort of constrains what we can request, it also contemplates that, there is a mechanism that can give us more than that number. And I think that's where we're sort of that 33.9 that Dr. Sanchione shares is being driven from, is while, we have a legal constraint, we certainly can request that the budget committee consider, and we certainly can, if a petitioner budget comes out 33.9 support, a different number. So I don't know how you want to go forward with what the agenda item is, which is our final budget.
Yeah, I think that it actually would be a good idea. In fact, I would say it's kind of our sworn duty, since we're being given this information from our administrators, to request a budget that's appropriate to the basic educational plan, to the needs of the students. So I don't know if so that's one thing. I think the other is that we do need to vote the actual number again tonight, even though we have submitted it once to the budget committee. I believe that even if the charter could be interpreted as not requiring it, it is in our interest, or in the interest of our students and families. It is within the interest of our students and families to make that make that request.
Dr. Larkin,
Yes, Ms. Farmer.
I'd like to make a motion that we vote on our final budget request for fiscal 2022 in the amount of $32,506,856, with an additional message that our needs and our desire is to procure 39.9 Was it 8 million?
33,981.
33.
Sorry, I didn't have it in front of me. 33 point, is it 9?
33,981,041.
Thank you,
I'll second that motion.
thank you.
Okay. So a motion has been made and seconded that gives our final budget request of 32.5 million. And that we will also send a statement that says that while the Rhode Island general law constrains the amount we can formally adopt for FY22, that same general law, as well as the Tiverton charter, actually allows for an appropriation more than the submission, and that we request for FY22 that the budget committee adopt a budget of $33,981,041 to correct years of chronic underfunding and in support of public education in Tiverton. Any discussion? Mrs. Pava?
Yes, I'm not having no discussion. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm just sort of giving you the opportunity to speak. So you have the floor. You're all set?
I'm all set.
Okay. Mr. Dakotas?
Yeah, I guess this would be new to me. Haven't served twice in the budget committee. I know what we're asking for. We know what we're asking for. We know what we need. I think we've made it clear what we need through Amy Roderick, Dr. Sanchioni. I don't know if it's a concern or I don't know if it's a question or a concern, but asking the committee for the 33.981, what are we, I know what we want, but what will we realistically expect versus asking them for what we already voted on? I guess that's my thought process.
I guess my understanding of the motion is we have a general law constrained amount and we just are asking them to consider adopting a different amount. It was no different than what Dr. Sanchioni did when he went before them. We understand our legal constraints, but we also are asking them to consider a different amount. They can say yes or no.
But we are voting on the 32.5, whatever.
Correct, Elaine, correct.
So the motion
But-
encompasses both
right.
the final number as well as sending a message to the budget committee. And I guess the way I would interpret this is the budget committee can, through their understanding of the revenue as well as the charter, I mean, they may sort of say we're crazy and this is not legal. They may say they're geniuses, let's do it. They may
say less. I mean, that's their purview.
They may say, no, we really meant 29 million. You know, the point is that we are, I think, making a clear statement so that it is unequivocal. Well, we didn't ask for enough, or I don't know what the argument might be, but it is unequivocal that we are asking what we are legally allowed to ask for, and we are also notifying the public body that actually has responsibility for drafting a budget to place before the electorate what is actually required. That's the way I view it. If that answers your question, Mike, I don't know if I was.
Yeah, you know, I think I understand. I mean, I know what we need, and I know what they expect, what we've already asked for. I just want to make sure that I know they can give us $1 or they can give us 33.981, right? That's the range they can give us. And in a perfect world, we would get everything we need. In the worst drastic case, which has happened before, it could be $1. So I think either way, whatever we vote, I mean, it's fine. If they know what we need, that's great. And if they don't give it to us, then
Yeah.
You know, it probably is going to be out of their hands anyway, I guess.
Well, you have to understand, we all have to understand, I think we do, but I guess I'm pointing out that it's not the budget the committee that's giving us something or not giving us something. It is all the voters that give us something or don't give us something. And so I think, this is all a means of making everyone understand not just what the needs are, but also what the consequences are of those needs being unmet for the last several years, as well as not being met this year.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I just want to make sure that in my head it was clear that if we ask them for the 32.5 and they give it to us, do we still go out and put an alternate budget in? Not us.
That is up to people who, that would be up to an entity. The only alternative budget we could submit is the budget we are legally allowed to submit. So we do have that option by the charter.
Right.
So if they decrease the amount the schools get, if they give us $1, we still actually have the legal authority to place our voted amount tonight on the ballot. It's access to the ballot we're actually talking about in that regard.
So if it's 33.9 we vote on tonight, then we as a school committee could legally put a alternate budget in for that.
No.
No,
We're
only
voting on
32.5.
32.5.
32.5 is it. Right. Okay.
We can legally place on the ballot the budget we requested of the budget committee. In a sense, I guess what I'm saying is the way to think of this is what's binding, what's not binding. We are bound to vote a number. That number cannot exceed a certain amount. Once we have voted that number, we have the authority to place that number on the ballot.
Okay.
Not have the authority to request 33.9. We do not have the authority to place 33.9 on the ballot. A petitioner does.
Or the budget committee can.
To do that or not is another story.
Right. That's the whole point of the addendum, that while we can't, we can ask the budget committee to consider that. And if they don't, then a petitioner can.
Right. And I think it's our duty to, let them know. We're not kind of, saying we only need $1 when we need 3 or whatever it is.
All right. I think that discussion's good. It helped my mind get to where I need to be. Hopefully anyone watching or that asks in the future will also be more clear. So that's good. Thanks.
Yep. Ms. Farnworth?
No, I just want to thank you, Dr. Larkin, for coming up with the language to support the 33.9 million. I was at a loss for how to word that, so thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I can talk when called upon. Deb, anything else?
All set. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from our administrators?
Well, this is Mr. Crow. One thing that I think the budget committee has to understand is the 32.5, which is the amount that your school committee legally can ask for, is also cutting 12.6 positions. In over the 2 years, that's going to be 37 positions that are going to be cut from the school department. So that's the problem with not funding last year, in the 24.2 positions being lost last year. Now we're going to lose another 12.6 if we only go to the 4%. And like Dr. Sanquioni said, if we get the $1 like we've done in the past, we're not going to meet the basic education plan.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's what, having a zero budget last year meant. Again, in the context of that point in time, that was the appropriate thing to do, and I stand by that. What's the appropriate thing to do now is to recognize that that's what happened last year and not pretend that, it was something else. We have contractual obligations. Our teachers are routinely at the bottom of any list in terms of salary scale. They still come in. They came in during COVID. I had a teacher drop an instrument off to my house for one of my children. That's the kind of dedication we have from our staff. We need to recognize that. Thank you, Mr. Corral. Any other comments from our administrators? Any questions or comments from the public, Ms. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
So the motion has been made and seconded. If there's no other discussion, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Mrs. Farnworth,
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas,
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo,
Yes,
Mrs. Palish,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everyone. I have a feeling we'll be continuing this discussion in the future in lots of places. All right. Why do I always lose my agenda right when I need it? Okay, I'm going to ask for motion to approve the consent agenda.
motion to approve the consent agenda.
Seconded.
Any opposed?
Dr. Larkin, if I could ask that to remove item 6A, third bullet.
The resolution expressing support for the state reimbursement of transportation services cost for public and private school pupils.
Yes.
Okay, that you're offering that as an amendment?
Yes.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. Since this is the consent agenda, there's no discussion. We can place that on a future agenda item if members choose. Any opposed to the amendment, removing item 6A bullet point 3? I'll take that as unanimous. So now we have a motion to approve the consent agenda that has been seconded. Any opposed? Take that as unanimous. Okay, we are on item 7A, old business, superintendent goals contract. This has my name next to it. All right. So as we had discussed previously, we were extending Dr. Sanchioni's contract from June 30th, 2021 to June 30th, 2024. I'll ask for a motion for approval.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
The contract does not, so I'll open it for discussion. Just one thing that is notable, the contract does not encompass a salary increase. That will be taken up on a year-by-year basis, as it is with all of our administrators. I'll open the floor to discussion on the part of the school committee, if any. Mrs. Pavo?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Mrs. Palish?
I just want to commend Dr. Sanchioni. You have, through an extremely difficult time, you have stepped up, you have led us, you have done it with a smile and with an ability to think that everything's going to be okay that I wish I had. And I do applaud you for that effort, and I'm looking forward to 3 more years.
Ms. Farnworth?
Well, first of all, just one minor suggestion that on the contract that is signed, that the agreement date be changed to May 11th, 2021.
Okay.
If you don't have a problem with that. And I would also like to reiterate my support, Dr. Sanchioni. It's been an eventful 3 years, and much of that has been very positive. And has it been perfect? Absolutely not. We're all human beings. None of us is perfect. But I absolutely support you as our superintendent, and I'm so happy that we're able to extend this contract for another 3 years.
Thanks, Dan. Mr. Dakotas?
Oh, yeah. So I'm the, what do they call it? The freshman, the 8th grader of this school committee, I guess. So on the short 5 months I've been here, Dr. Sanchioni has been available, whether I have a question offhand or have parent or somebody in the community wants an answer, needs an answer, he's always gotten back to me. I met him the day he was announced as superintendent. And I've always found him to be accessible, personable, and I think he's done a great job. I have 2 children in the school system, and I wouldn't want to move my family anywhere else. I think this is the place that we want to be. I think it's an upcoming place where in the next 5 to 10 years, Tiverton is going to be right there with a Portsmouth or a Barrington, East Greenwich. I think we have the right person. I know we have the right person leading it. So I have all the sentiments that have been said before me, and I just want to make sure Dr. Sanquioni wants to be with us for 3 more years. But if he does, it's great. We'll be happy to have him.
Okay. Okay, you should start calling yourself just the homecoming king.
Well, they always used to call me the mayor of Newport, but I live in Tiverton now, and we don't have a mayor, so I do my best.
All right, so I think just echoing the sentiments of others, Peter's done an amazing job of leading us through this pandemic, and certainly continuing to lead the district. You know, we sometimes, dare I say this, you know, in some quarters, we are criticized. The district is sort of kind of slandered, I would say. We are much better than the slander that is pointed at us. And the real point, however, is we could be much greater. And that's kind of, I think, where Peter is going to lead us. He is a very optimistic person. He and I have an ongoing debate whether or not I'm optimistic at all. But I will optimistically support this motion. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. Again, thank you again, Peter, for all of your hard work. That actually brings us to the end of our agenda at 8:13. Imagine that.
Did Peter want to say anything?
Peter?
Not to put him on the spot, but.
Yeah, that's true. It's a personal matter, so I can't really open it up to the floor to the public, but Peter, have at it.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. Definitely mentioned it. You know, it's if you look at the accomplishments over the last 3 years, and you know that credit is in mine. Just look at the rest of the faces on the screen here, all the administration here, the things we do as a team, and we've done a lot. I mean, whether it's been one-on-one technology or writing programs or putting in a diversion program to help our students. I mean, we strive to do what's best for our students. Those are the conversations we have in our ad team meetings. You know, we're talking, we have a PD day coming up on Monday, and the whole thing's focused on, again, training our staff and professional learning communities. I know that's jargon to a lot of people, but it's a system that allows our system to thrive. And, you know, when you have a team that's all committed to the same vision and mission, we can do great things. So that's what inspires me. I think there's, you know, the years ahead, we can continue to have these successes, and that's going to translate into high graduation rates, high acceptance rates in colleges, and great opportunities for our graduates. That's what we all want to have happen. So I appreciate your confidence in me, and look forward to working tomorrow when I show up.
Okay, great. And yeah, you know, I have to say, you know, looking at sort of all the faces on Zoom, I applaud all of your administrators as well. You know, those that have been here for a while, those that have been brought in. Can't think of a stronger, better group of people to lead our district. So thank you all very much. All right, so we have a meeting again, May 18th, next week, and we have a meeting June 8th. One other sort of housekeeping detail is that the Budget Committee has asked, we'll be taking up the school budget on Thursday night at 7. They, I guess, invited me. It was kind of a, yeah, I guess it was more of a notification than an invitation. I told them I would be going. I did ask them that if there were, because they are going to be voting, that if they had questions that that they be submitted beforehand. So I'm willing to go on Thursday. I'll answer questions I can. Hopefully, if there are very specific questions or pointed questions or major questions, that we'll have them beforehand so that we can give them the most complete and thorough answer. And I'll get in touch with you or Peter or Amy. I'm not sure that it's going to be too much benefit for anyone else to go, but if anyone else wants to come, feel free to come. I did not post it, and we have passed the deadline for posting, so only one other school committee member could attend. And that's that. And, you know, actually, I'm just going to go back to one last thing on Peter's
Go ahead.
Peter's contract. You know, we also have to acknowledge our teachers, and I feel badly that was an oversight. You know, our teachers have led the district as well. You know, and that's actually the real mark of professionalism. You know, there's a thing said in medicine oftentimes that you know, managing doctors is like herding cats. That's not true in education. I think the sense of professionalism, the sense of teamwork from our teachers, from our other staff, sort of just reinforces what our administrators and our superintendent are doing. So thank you to all our teachers as well, again, for all of the work they do. Okay, so if there's any other questions or comments from the committee, I'll entertain those now. Otherwise, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed?